Great. Okay, so welcome. My name is Solon Barocas. I'm a professor at Cornell, but I'm also the general chair of the Conference on Fairness, Accountability, and Transparency, STAR, or I've been told it could also be pronounced SPLAT. So I'm also actually a graduate of New York University. I got my PhD here a couple years ago, and I'm a New York native. So I am particularly pleased to welcome you all to New York and NYU. And I thought I would start by giving a little brief history, I guess, of the conference and the kind of community that we've brought together here. So about 4 years ago, Moritz Hart, who I think is somewhere in the room here, back there, and I put in a proposal for a little workshop at NIPS that was on fairness, accountability, and transparency in machine learning in particular. And we had our first workshop then with about, 35 people in the room. So this is about a little bit more than 4 years ago. Many of the people who presented at that first workshop subsequently became members of the organizing committee, including members of the PC and the PC chairs. I'll introduce you in a moment. And quickly we kind of launched this sequence of workshops that were bringing together people mostly in computer science, but some folks from law and policy and social sciences to kind of think rigorously and in detail about how to tackle problems of fairness, accountability, and transparency as first-order computational problems. And as we grew and as the workshops progressed, similar things began to happen in other fields within computer science. So folks began to organize conferences on data and algorithmic transparency, ethics and natural language processing. There was a workshop on responsible recommendation systems. There's a forthcoming workshop on software fairness. So this kind of way of thinking about questions of fairness and accountability and transparency has become its own thing. It's a kind of emerging conversation across multiple subfields within computer science, and increasingly is inviting in a lot of other people, in fact, like myself, who are not computer scientists, to engage and to think about what it means to take these issues seriously as computational problems. And when we began to then think about how to continue to foster and support this growth, it seemed clear to us that there was value in potentially holding a kind of standalone independent conference, not just a workshop attached to any particular annual computer science conference. And what we had in mind, I think, were sort of two main goals. The first was to really bring together people who are now working across multiple subfields within computer science, largely because we believed there was a lot to gain from having an opportunity to engage with each other, to actually see where there are interesting points of contact, even though we might be working in different subfields within computer science. And so it's really been great to draw in people who, for instance, feel more at home in natural language processing, or in security, or in databases, for instance. At the same time, the conference was also meant to be a way to much more effectively engage non-computer scientists, a broader, more interdisciplinary group of people, who perhaps might not make it to a computer science conference, for instance. And so today, we're, I think, really pleased to have lots of folks here who come from other fields, not just from computer science. And the hope was to facilitate a kind of more meaningful, deeper conversation between people who kind of think about these issues as law and policy issues, and the computer scientists who are beginning to build tools to help kind of characterize and address these problems. So in the future, we'll continue to kind of support and encourage people to have these workshops. Our goal is not to replace these workshops. Our goal is to kind of complement them. The conference will be a kind of annual event to bring together people who will continue to make inroads in their own respective subfields. And so we'll actually continue to have a FATML workshop, for instance, and I imagine people will continue to stage these other kinds of workshops I mentioned, but that this conference can become a home, an annual home for people who maybe want to come together across subfields and have an opportunity to engage with other folks who are themselves not computer scientists. I have to say, it was a pretty satisfying experience trying to organize this event, both because it was still surprising, despite what I knew to be growing interest in these issues, to just see how much interest there was. So it's really delightful to see a room full of people here. I have to tell you that in a way, you're the privileged few. We had to actually turn away like 400 people. So this is really actually a testament, I think, to how seriously these issues have now begun to be taken seriously. And I think the hope that there can be a lot of meaningful progress if we continue down this path. So I'm pleased to have brought everyone together, but I also commend all of you for being invested in building this community as well. Okay, so let me just mention a few logistical details. First is that we are absolutely, certainly going to fill the capacity of this room as the day goes on. I kindly ask that people try to make as effective use of the space as possible, meaning don't feel strange getting closer to someone in your row of seats. I should also mention that the room where we had the catered breakfast this morning will remain available both days, throughout the days, and it's a place where people can step out and go hang out, but notably there's actually a live stream that will be streamed directly to that room as well, so in a way, it is a kind of default overflow room. I did not want to encourage people to think that there was an overflow room, but in practice, that's available as well. And please do make good use of it. Please take time to go hang out there, even if it might be during a session. Also, please make good use of the fact that we're going to have catered lunches and breaks. So meet people, introduce yourself. This is as much an opportunity to hear about the interesting research that people are doing as it is an opportunity to meet people and learn more about the community. There also is a conference hashtag, and for people who use Twitter, it could be a nice way to also engage in some conversation as we go. The hashtag is FAT2018. And I just want to have one quick note about kind of the respect and dignity that we hope people will show each other in this often quite challenging interdisciplinary conversation. So I have in mind two quite different things. One is sort of, really trying to understand each other on their own terms. We may be coming from quite different backgrounds, and I would be really grateful if we continue to show the kind of mutual respect that has been evident in previous years when we've had these kinds of workshops. So engage deeply and critically, but please do so in a respectful way. And the second point is just a point about harassment. So we don't have an official policy this year. We will in the future. But as a general matter, we really just hope that people behave themselves in a respectful way, and we hope that there really isn't any kind of incident. Okay. The final thing I have to do is just thank a lot of people, and there are many, many, many people to thank. So the first is to thank NYU. NYU has been enormously generous in providing this space. They have made many people available to support the actual running of the event, many of whom you've met outside. In particular, I want to start by calling out the local chairs, who are Amanda Lewandowski and Jason Schultz, who helped run the law school's technology, law, and policy clinic. This is the reason, really, we're able to have the event here, and we are very, very grateful. More specifically, I want to also thank Nicole Arts and Susan Hodge, who are the folks who have provided really critical administrative support. It's very likely you saw them on your way in today. They were helped out by a number of student volunteers, who I also am very grateful to have the support of. I'll introduce Sorelle, Friedler, and Christo Wilson in just a moment. They were the program chairs, and I think they did an absolutely fantastic job running the review process and putting together a pretty remarkable program for this year. So thank you to them as well. It's been really awesome to work with them. They were supported by a number of track chairs who also did a fantastic job wrangling all these things together. And we had a pretty remarkable program committee that really did an excellent job reviewing all the submissions. Finally, we had a publication chair because this year we actually have proceedings, official proceedings through the Journal of Machine Learning Research, and that was run by Suresh Venkata Subramanian. I'm going to get this wrong, Suresh. I'm very, very sorry. But thanks to Suresh, too, for doing an excellent job in securing a fantastic publication venue for this year's proceedings. Finally, I just want to thank a few people up at Cornell who helped on my end because I'm officially at Cornell, who did a lot of the work making the finances for this event possible. So first, I want to thank Eileen Grabowski, Janine Orr, and Shannon Federi-Pelto. In particular, those of you who are here because of the student stipend or supported by a student stipend, that was not really possible without their help. And so while you won't ever meet them, that really was a critical component here. So thanks to them. Finally, I just want to say that we're very fortunate to have received generous funding from a number of organizations that have made this possible. The first is the Ethics and Governance of AI Initiative that provided a really critical seed grant that funded a considerable amount of this conference. The MacArthur Foundation also was generous in giving further support. Google and Facebook Research and H2O.ai further offered these unrestricted gifts that just made it possible for us to stage the event. And in particular, I want to point out that we tried very, very hard to spend the money wisely. So hopefully you noticed that the registration fee was relatively low. That was on purpose and designed to ensure that people from a diversity of fields could attend. I should also point out that we spent the vast majority of the money actually on student stipends and making it possible for students to participate. And in the end, we were actually able to support students in one way or another, over 100 students actually. And I have to say, of all the things that we were doing, seeing the applications for those, for the financial support for students was actually one of the more remarkable things about planning the event. There is literally a generation of students who are coming into the field that see this as sort of the obvious thing to do in their research, and it's been really, really edifying and really encouraging. So with that, I just want to welcome you all again, and I'm really grateful that you've come and you've made time, and I look forward to meeting as many of you as possible. I'm going to hand it over now to Sorelle Friedler and Christo Wilson, who will tell you a little bit more about the program. So thanks very much.
Hi everyone, I'm Sorelle Friedler. It's really quite remarkable to see all of you here. I was at that 35-person workshop, and it's amazing to see all of you in the room. Also, one more logistical note. It looks like everyone has found a seat at this point, but throughout the day, as things get more and more full, please do, move over so that people can sit. And if you see people standing who maybe should actually be offered a seat, please be kind and do that.
So good morning. I'm Christo Wilson, Sorelle. We were the program committee chairs for this inaugural event. We are thrilled to be here. We're thrilled to have you here. And frankly, I think we're a little overwhelmed by the response to this event. So to give you a little bit of details about the process that went into constructing the program, we opened up papers to registration. There were 117 papers that registered. Ultimately, 73 of them submitted to the conference, which is frankly fantastic for a first-year event. We asked the authors to self-identify the area of their paper to help us streamline the review process. So we had 6 areas, so visualization, HCI and user studies, theory and security, statistics, machine learning, data mining, natural language processing and vision, programming languages, databases, and other systems, measurement and algorithm audits, and finally law, policy, and social studies, or social science. As you would expect for an event like this, most of the submissions ended up being in kind of the core statistics and machine learning track, but we were actually thrilled to see the response in the law, policy, and social science track as well. We really didn't expect that, and it was fantastic to see that level of engagement. We also offered authors the opportunity to choose whether they wanted to be on the proceedings track or not. So essentially, do you want your paper to be published in an archival format, or do you want to essentially treat this as a presentation and then submit your paper to a journal later? And this was specifically designed to support both the computer science community, where it's assumed that papers at conferences will be published formally, and people in other areas where that's not typically the case. So in terms of the review process, we had 49 amazing people on the program committee. They did about 5 reviews each on papers, also supported by about 3 external reviewers. Our PC was overseen by 15 fantastic track chairs. So these are experts in each of their respective areas who helped guide the discussions in each of these respective areas. So there was after paper submissions on October 6th, there was a brief discussion period. And that led into a call between the program chairs and all of the track chairs where we sort of calibrated and ended up making the final decisions about acceptances and constructed the program. In terms of the criteria and sort of the review process, submissions were double-blind. The specific instructions to the PC members for reviewing, we informed them that this is not a workshop, this is a conference. So papers should be judged accordingly in terms of their length and their contribution. We told the reviewers to target an acceptance rate of around 20%. So out of the 5 papers that they saw, only one ultimately was going to be accepted, so calibrate accordingly. And finally, we really emphasized that review quality was paramount. I mean, we're trying to build a community here. This is an inaugural event. And we view this as really, really critical to enfranchise the people in this community to give them good feedback. There were special allowances made for interdisciplinary authors. So at a lot of conferences, people are very strict about paper formatting and kind of the rules. And we really threw that out the window. There were general guidelines about the format of papers. We told people not to be sticklers about formatting, right? We can deal with this afterwards. And finally, the reviewers were not told whether papers were on the proceedings track or not, right? So we didn't want to create a double standard for anyone who had elected not to be appearing in the proceedings. As I mentioned, every paper had a track chair who helped guide the discussion. And finally, and sort of somewhat unexpectedly, 2 of the accepted papers were conditionally accepted and received additional shepherding. So I think this was actually a valuable part of the process and something that we'll hope to formalize more for next year's conference. So ultimately, 17 papers were accepted out of the 73 submissions. So this was a 23% accept rate, so almost exactly on target. Papers were accepted roughly in proportion across the different areas, which was also nice to see. And we were thrilled to see that most of the papers actually opted to be on the proceedings track. So we really see this as a vote of confidence in this emerging conference and this area in general, that people felt comfortable planting their flag here and saying, this is where I want my paper to appear. We had 2 Best Paper Awards. So the goal of the first award was to highlight the paper with the best technical contribution. And the goal of the second award was to highlight a paper that blended a really strong technical contribution, but also with an interdisciplinary component. So something that's bridging the divide between the computer science people and the law, policy, and social science people. Papers were nominated by the PC and ultimately voted on by everyone to decide the winners. So the winner for Best Technical Contribution is The Cost of Fairness in Binary Classification. And the winner in the technical and interdisciplinary category is a case study of algorithm-assisted decision-making in child maltreatment hotline screening decisions. Those papers will both be presented tomorrow in the afternoon, and a round of applause for our winners.
This afternoon, we'll also have tutorials. We ran a separate submission process for the tutorials, and we ended up actually getting many more submissions than we had expected. So we ended up with 33 submissions for only the 6 slots that we have in the afternoon. We're running these as 3 different tracks. So if you look in the program for this afternoon, you'll see that while for most of the conference we'll all be together here in this room, this afternoon for the tutorials we'll be splitting into 3 different rooms. The 3 different tracks are a track that's trying to translate ideas from computer science to social scientists. The second one is translating in the other direction, right, trying to explain sort of social science ideas to computer scientists. And then the last one is a hands-on tool-based track that's focusing on trying to share software that's been developed with the broader community. Each tutorial was reviewed by 2 to 3 program committee members, and for the hands-on tutorials, they actually tried to, install them and run them, and make sure that the tools actually worked. We ended up with 6 tutorials, sort of 2 per sub-track, I guess. But again, there were a lot more tutorials that were submitted that were great, right? That absolutely should have found room at the conference if we had more time. And we've asked those tutorial folks to write up a sort of 2 to 3 page document to try to share some of this information with the community. Those are available online at that website, and I do encourage you to go ahead and read them. I think there's a lot of valuable information there to learn. So the schedule for today, we're about to have a keynote. Solon will introduce her in a minute. There will be coffees in the room across the hall, and again, also a catered lunch in the room across the hall. We'll have 2 sessions, and then in the afternoon, again, there will be those tutorials that'll be in those 3 separate rooms. And the other thing that I wanted to point out is that as you're deciding which tutorial track to go to, or potentially how you want to move between the different tutorial rooms, there are now up online sort of short descriptions about each of the tutorials to help you make that decision, or if I've neglected to put one of them up, I will do that soon. Final announcements. So to authors and session chairs, please arrive early for your session. Come up here to the podium and make sure that like when you hook in your computer, it actually presents and all of that, so that we can try to move things along as seamlessly as possible. Over lunch, which again will be in the room across the hall, you are welcome. It's optional, but we encourage you to chat with each other about topics of your choosing. So we're going to do this as sort of an informal birds of a feather session. There are placards out at the registration desk along with markers. If you have a topic that you want to specifically talk to other folks about, then you should feel free to write that clearly on the placard, put it on one of those sort of standing tables in the other room, and other people can talk to you about it. You're also, of course, welcome to talk to other random people who you meet as you do. And then finally, if you are thinking about going to one of the hands-on tutorials, as you look at the schedule, if one of those looks exciting, it's not required, but if you happen to find the Wi-Fi time before then to do some of the downloads, that might make it more possible for the tutorials to run. Because of course, as you know, if 150 people all attempt to download the same thing at the same time over conference Wi-Fi, that might not work. So if you know in advance you want to go to something, please try to do a little bit of the downloading beforehand. And with that, I think we mostly just want to thank everybody again who Solon just thanked, all of the program committee and the track chairs who really, I think, chose a wonderful program. Also the local chairs, and of course Solon, who this conference would literally not exist without. So thank you.